Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you to all of you for being here, particularly Bharat, my dear friend Bharat, who arranged for this months ago. So I'm happy to be with you in your fellowship and delight in knowing you. I would love to know more about the retreat process that many of you undoubtedly have taken, but I'm here to share with you my experiences. So that, I guess, we'll have to wait for another time. So in the introduction, Cass could as easily have introduced me as someone who loves to dialogue with the mystery in the heavenly skies, as someone who seeks to commune with nature, as someone who loves to learn and listen. And those three orientations are really more about my inner self and less about all that I'm doing outside. So the topic that I've chosen to share with you is the inner life, because for me, that is the heart of the retreat process. And in this alchemical retreat that I'm studying and sharing with others and entering into myself, there are stages of development and process, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They begin and end with breath, which we'll share in a moment, and purification. So the purification is not only purification of the body or of the mind and of the heart and of the essence of our being, which we might call the soul, but is also a purification of our identity, who we conceive ourselves to be. And that is something that brings us into a mystery, a deep and abiding mystery that we could call transcendence or immanence, because it has both characteristics within it. But then from that place of purification and encounter with the mystery, we seek to know ourself. So not just our outer story, but our inner story. What is meaningful to us? What brought us to our Dharma? And so for me, there were things like looking at the stars at night as a child and experiencing the transfiguration and transformation of the Catholic Mass, and then losing all of that and finding myself anew as I listened to the call to prayer. And then again, through the encounter with the Sufis and their ecstatic dance and meditations, and finally into this retreat process that I love so much and love to share. So ultimately, in these explorations of stages in the retreat process, we land on coming back fully embodied into life, unifying what is outside with what is inside, and always allowing it to grow, to change, to be new. So as I said, I'm sure that is something that you are familiar with. So, for a moment, let's just take this question of what is the inner life and reflect upon it, each of ourselves. Now, as we do so, I'll read just a few quotes from the Sufi sage Hazrat Inayat Khan. He says, "The inner life sheds further light in our journey of seeking and finding, going on and on in an upward spiral, crowning one's life with ever growing insights and overwhelming views. The inner life is not separate from the outer life, nor does it require leaving the world, renouncing all pleasures and comforts. It is the enrichment of life with qualities that will last, with a source of energy and love which is truly one's own, and permanently available if we but know how to access it." So, in the retreat process, there are what we call 4 pillars, and these help us access or open the doorway to the inner world. So, the first is silence, which we shared earlier, and another is fasting, and that is fasting not only from food, but from needs of any kind, entertainment or journaling or so forth. And then another is solitude. So sometimes we take retreats in groups, and yet each of us is engaged in our own practice, perhaps like earlier this morning when we were sitting in silence. And also, there are the times when we take retreats individually, which are challenging, more challenging, because there isn't the group support and that group energy to support us. But there is an inner energy and presence from the guide, the person who is overseeing our process. And then the fourth one is watchfulness, what arises as we sit and as we contemplate. Now, I think these 4 pillars are probably very familiar to you in your own contemplative practice. What the Sufis add that might be different, I'm not sure, but it's a significant part of the inner life in the Sufi world, and that is the creative imagination. So, creative imagination is an aspect of mind in our teaching, one that follows just naturally after interpreting sensations, experiencing memory, and then conjoining them in something that is familiar to our creative imagination. Let's say the sun. You know, when we say the word the sun, we can kind of picture the sun in our mind's eye, but then the creative part of it is in expanding from that initial inner memory and selecting, let's say, aspects of what we're representing or we choose to represent. Like for the sun, it might be radiance and mastery and majesty, or the giving of life, all of these qualities that I find in the sun, and establishing a resonance with them in my heart. So, in order for me to be able to discern what is a quality of an object or a person, a life being before me, there's something in me that recognizes it. So that is the first part of establishing a kind of sympathetic resonance, which expands our life circle. So the creative imagination is extremely important in Sufism. And I'd like to read another short passage from Inayat Khan, who says, delving into the light of the inner life, we are able to attain happiness, power, knowledge, life, and peace within oneself, independent of all things outside, perhaps prompted by things from outside, but ultimately when we claim them as our own, they become ours, and they're not dependent on, let's say, outer peace. If we have peace in our being and we go into a gathering, it's possible that we can bring that vibration of peace into that gathering. And it's also possible that in very challenging circumstances, it will wobble, or it will crack, or it will fail, and we will find ourselves back into a kind of reactivity that is not holding a peacefulness that we know within ourselves. So we retreat, and then we reconnect, and we come back until finally, or ongoingly, perhaps is better said, that peace holds in ourself despite these challenging circumstances. And there's another aspect of this working with the creative imagination, and that is in beholding beauty outside of ourselves. So, for instance, in this example, it could be the fragility of a flower, the flow of a stream, the steadfastness of the mountains, the uprightness of the trees. So I'm linking here an attribute that I see and I can respect. In fact, I can glorify, praise in beings around me. And I can look at human beings in a very similar way. I can say, oh, how kind that person is, or how strong of heart that person is. And in identifying that, then bringing it closer into my own being. And Inayat Khan says this: collect what is beautiful and good and add it naturally to your character. One doesn't need to make an effort to build it in. One only needs to forget oneself and continue to praise the beauty and the good before one. So that is, let's say, a Sufi practice that I aspire to. Can't always hold, but with lots of practice have been able to remember. So I'd like to share with you how this works for me in practice. And if you're willing, we'll begin with the breath, and you can breathe with eyes open or eyes closed. And if they're open, you might offset the glance or just lower the gaze. And begin maybe with an exhalation or two, extended, and a natural inhalation to respond. And in doing so, find the swing of the breath from the outside to the inside. And there are ways to do this, one of which is to focus on the nostrils, how the breath comes in, passes the throat, travels to the trachea and into the lungs, where the essential ingredient of oxygen is picked up by the blood, travels all throughout the body. And then back in conjunction with the heart into the lungs that we exhale, all that we don't need, our body can't use. And as we do this, we recognize that the breath that we breathe, the air that we breathe, is part of the earth atmosphere. And it's comprised of the molecules of breath of all air-breathing beings who have lived before us. And that our breath, as we exhale, in rapport with the fauna around us, the flora around us, will comprise the air that future beings will breathe. And of course, not only what is natural, but what we have, through our industry, placed into the air. But in our meditation this morning, let us focus on the beautiful and the good. And bringing the breath, which is both collective and individual, into our physical heart. We know we can place it anywhere in the body, sore muscle for healing, a shoulder that needs relaxing. We can take it to a subtle center in the belly or in the base of the spine for grounding, or in the third eye or the crown, or in the heart, in the center of the chest, the expanded heart. But right now, let's listen within and connect to our physical heart. Can we feel and even perhaps hear the beat of the heart? Or the pulse of the blood as it circulates in the body? And how does it make us feel to connect to our own heart? Now, in seeking to expand both the scope of the breath and the feelings in the heart, we might consider those we love. And so let those beings, those objects, those concerns for the world, that which pulls your heart, allow it to pull it open. Not a should, but what stands before your heart, what pulls your heart open. Now, the living heart, of course, feels. A heart of stone can't feel, but the living tissue of a heart has feelings. And sometimes those feelings are painful. And so the challenge with the pain that comes into the heart is to stay present to it and allow it to open the heart. Without closing the heart down or becoming numb. And it's often been said by psychotherapists that if we stay present to what is in our heart, particularly the pain that we may feel in our heart, something can be revealed to us about its source or its origin that we may not know, but that will help us to abide. And so often I have heard people come into meditative practice through a broken heart, a heart that has burst outside of the smallness of itself, but is looking to grow with consciousness as well as with feeling. And so here is where I, one place in my own inner world and creative imagination, I return to the thought of the experience of illuminating my heart So, what does that mean to illuminate my heart? Well, certainly to bring conscious awareness to what I'm feeling and to be present to it without judgment, perhaps with tears, but without condemnation, criticism, or confusion. And so for me, the confusion can be illuminated by bringing light into my heart, into my feelings. Light in the sense of buoyancy and in the sense of radiance, like the radiance from the sun. And so, if I'm able to bring that light forth from the inner resourcefulness of my being, well, that's wonderful. And if I need a little supportive help, I go out into the sunshine. So that is where I find a beneficent light that can flood my being and remind me of the purity that exists within the essence of all being. Now, those are words that I use, but it's important for me in this contemplative inquiry to develop a language so that I know how to have this inner dialogue within myself. But also how to seek support from the world around me. So I might consider those natural beauties I spoke of earlier and really look to see what attribute or quality I might see in them to take into my heart to support me in a particular way. And so in that way, I'm opening a channel between the what we might call the outer life and the inner life. And I'm also opening a channel from what I might view as my personal need, my self, my inner self, and the world around me as it exists in the greater reality. Because we experience these archetypal qualities in the particularity of our being. So it's been said, for instance, how do we know justice? We know we yearn for justice, but how is it we came to know justice? Well, one way is to recognize that in action in people, just people. We know justice by just people, like we know roseness from the rose, or sweetness from the taste, or a smile, or a gift. We know that archetypal principle. And so as we see them in others, we call them forth in our own being. So let us turn to this one quality of light to bring light into the heart, to enlighten the heart, to allow it to be buoyant and free. And so, in our mind's eye, we may hold an image of a sunrise and how we may be seeking across the horizon where that light of the first ray of the sun may appear, scanning the horizon back and forth. And perhaps you've experienced this. Undoubtedly, you've experienced this. And then, even though we know not to look into the sun, when that first ray pierces the environment, raising itself above the horizon, we can't help but notice it, even as we begin to avert our eyes and see in that liquid gold light of the sun, and how with the breath we can consciously draw it in along this channel to our heart, and exhale, and again look into the mind's eye, the brightness of the sun, and bring it forth again into our being, maybe with a prayer, a call to create in our heart that radiance that may pour forth into our relationships, like the sun is blessing us now. So we can breathe for a few moments, letting the swing of the breath bring that light of the sun into our heart. And not only that light, but all that we associate with it. And I have a photograph, but you don't need to look now because I'm going to share my screen. That if it's difficult to envision the light, let me see, what did I do with you? There you are. That this photograph may appear. So let's see if I can bring it up. And share. This is a photograph I took. So sorry. As the sun was rising over the horizon of the Gulf of Mexico. And I don't think I looked into the sun, but from that time I've noticed just exactly what I notice when the sun rises here in New Mexico. There's that white gold flash, and then that overwhelming radiance of the sun that causes me to turn my eyes another way. So staying present to the feeling in the heart, inviting the light of the sun into the heart. We might say in our mind something like, in the light of the sun, I discover thy divine light. In the light of the sun, as we inhale the light of the sun, and as we exhale, I discover thy divine light. Who is the one that causes the sun to shine? So I'm going to stop the share now and ask us to come back into our present moment of our shared fellowship and take enough time that it feels natural for you to do so without leaving any of the goodness or the beauty. For what we could do with that goodness and beauty is dedicate it to those beings that we care about, or the situations that are where people are struggling into the world. And then for any obstacle or difficulty that we experienced, to remove that from the path of the others who may be walking this inner road, this inner journey. So I'd like to conclude with this poem from Jalaluddin Rumi that is expressed in Coleman Barks' voice. Rumi says, "We are brought delicious desserts and we rarely refuse them. We worship devoutly when we're with others. Hours we sit, though we get up rather quickly after a few minutes when we pray alone. Then we hurry down the gullet of our wantings. But these qualities can change as minerals in the ground rise inside trees and become tree. As a plant faces an animal and enters the animal, so a human can put down heavy baggage and become light." So I'm going to pause here and ask, in the ensuing silence, if there are any thoughts or questions anyone would like to share. And perhaps, Cass, you might be able to help me see if there are any hands that are raised, or, these kind of reactions that happen where the hands, where is it, the raise hand, like that, come up. So I am going to go on gallery view and see all of your beautiful faces who are here. I would love to take the time to get to know each one of you. I have an engagement at 1:00 my time, noon yours, so I'd like for these last few minutes to be an opportunity to get to know you better.
Jeff has his hand raised here.
Hi, Amida. Thank you for an incredible talk. I've really come to appreciate ways and methods that we can look internally, because physically our senses are looking outward all the time, and that it's so important in our own development to have methods and even be aware of our inner world. In India, the city the Inaris is built on the Ganges, and the Ganges makes a 90-degree turn away from the bank, goes out, turns 180 degrees and comes back. And they built a temple there to symbolize when a person begins to look inward as this holy moment in our development. And I just feel it's the mystery, and navigating, as you said, is the word of the day. So thank you.
That's such a beautiful image. Thank you so much for sharing it. How wonderful to see that without and within. Thank you, Bharat.
I had a question. You mentioned four qualities that help us develop our inner life. One, like silence, solitude, fasting, something else. And I love that you added that, you included creative imagination. And thank you so much for that explanation of how to use that and bring other qualities into developing our internal life. So what was the other quality?
Watchfulness,
Watchfulness. Okay, thank you.
the
I
byword.
don't take notes fast enough.
Yeah. Yes. Creative imagination is, you can find it in any of the ancient Sufis' expressions. And so often those expressions are paradoxical or koanic or befuddling in a way. There is one from the Sufi al-Hallaj who said, "The sun of thy divine light has risen above the horizon of my heart, and this day will know no end." So it's just something, yes, beautiful and worth plumbing. Like, how does that work? And what does that mean?
I love the phrase "gullet of our wantings" too that you mentioned.
Yes,
It seems to be ever present, omnipresent.
yes, indeed. Those are those inner tastes, that well, we know them from all the desserts that we eat. Well, friends, I know this is the moment of the announcements and dedication of merit. So once again, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I just find your fellowship, the beauty of looking upon your fellowship.
Thank you so much for fantastic talk today, expanding our horizons.